So now to charter schools in a new report showing some pretty remarkable outcomes for charter graduates. It's called Turning the Tassel in Washington State. That was the title of the report that came out just today. I got the opportunity to sit down with the folks who crafted the report and some of the folks that are leaders in the charter school effort here in Washington State. On Monday evening, we did a little, sort of pre report session, and I got to see some of the highlights. And this study was really designed to look at what life looks like for young adults after high school graduation. And they looked at beyond the traditional metrics, right? Graduation rates, standardized test scores. They wanted to look at more comprehensive sort of early adult outcomes like continuing education, employment, financial stability, income. Do you own a home? I mean, there's a lot of things there that they looked at. It was admittedly a relatively small sample, and in large part, that's because we don't have very many charter schools in the state of Washington. They had about 100 graduates, starting back from 2019 graduates to where we are now, that took part in the survey. And the results are pretty compelling and worth a closer look. Remember, Washington did not even get charter schools until 2014. It took years of fighting the Washington Education Association. It took citizen initiatives. Then there were multiple court challenges. Um, Charter schools are public schools, but they don't receive as much funding, and so it's a real challenge for them to even remain in operation. We've got 15 of them across the state right now, and still a limited number of students served in the settings. But I want to remind you that these are some of the most vulnerable students, many low-income families, um, kids with highly specialized needs. There's a school for teen parents, so they can stay in school. Their little ones can be in an adjacent daycare setting so that they can move on in their lives. And based on findings in this report, those charter school graduates are making way more money on average. Many of them, it sounds like way more money than you or I probably, than graduates from traditional public schools. And many of them already owning their own homes, even though they're in their 20s. And I thought that was pretty remarkable and worth a closer look. So I'm going to rattle off some of the findings here because I think it paints a picture of real world success for these charter graduates. And remember, only one out of every 200 public school students in the state of Washington is in a charter school versus a traditional public school. One of the findings, here's a big one. We're going to put this up on the screen for you. Um, Look at this, employed Washington charter school alumni earn an average of more than $120,000 a year compared to just over 76,000 for district alumni. That's a $44,000 gap. Pretty darn significant. Here is another one for you. Charter graduates are far more likely to be working a full-time job. It's a huge gap. And of course, once you get out of high school, whether you're going to trades, you're going to, post-secondary education, you're just looking to be gainfully employed, that's a pretty wide gap. A couple of other ones I want to mention. 83% of charter school alumni are working part-time or full-time compared to 62% of district alumni. And I'm going to read one more. This is from the report, which, by the way, I'm preparing an article today, which we'll put up at thecentersquare.com/Washington with links to all this in case you're curious. But 47% of Washington charter school alumni report owning their home compared to 18% of district alumni. You find me any 20 something now that owns their home, and I'll shake their hand and congratulate them because home ownership is, obviously cost prohibitive in the state of Washington. And I found that to be something to be modeled after. We need to figure out what the heck these schools are doing right and what these graduates are doing right. So today I did interview Washington Policy Center's Education Center Director, Vicki Murray. She is a charter school advocate. Spent 10 years, she told me, on a charter school board. I assume that was in Arizona, though I didn't ask her, but that's where she came from. And she simply cannot understand why there was so much resistance to charter schools in Washington.
And Washington has not lifted its cap on public charter schools, so they're dying by attrition. But when you see the consistent research, including the latest research that came from our State Board of Education, charter schools are working, and they're working with children who are not typically served well in a traditional public setting. The success, sadly, in a largely monopolistic system is its downfall because you're making the status quo look bad. And charter schools are doing more with less. And that's the story we've heard again and again, state after state, city after city that has embraced charter schools. We see this pattern. In fact, there was recent research done across 9 major metropolitan cities in the United States. And it found not only were, as you'd expect, charter schools are serving predominantly low-income children, children with all sorts of special needs. And guess what? Charter schools that get less funding, these, for every dollar invested in a charter school, the return on investment averaged across those 9 cities is about $6.50
Wow.
compared to the return on investment for a traditional public school of $3 and change. So, I mean, the returns are just enormous. I think, and instead of fighting or denying or trying to squeeze them out, we should be looking at what charter schools are doing. Because look at the charter schools we have in our state. They're serving, for example, teenage parents. They are serving, they're doing all sorts of incredible things. Children who would otherwise be left behind, they're thriving.
So, for all the great news in this report about life success for charter school graduates in Washington state, unfortunately, I inform you that majority Democrats just cut major funding for charter schools in this session that ended last week. And I should remind you, they already receive less funding because charter schools in the state of Washington are not allowed a cut of the local levies that supplement schools. They get the same per pupil funding on the state level, but say you're Seattle school district, and I know they've got a couple of charters, or at least did have a couple of charters in the Seattle school district. If local districts there pass these enrichment levies, the charters aren't allowed any access to those funds. So they're already operating on these shoestring budgets, and yet we just took away $7.5 million from their funding for this year. That was what ended up in the state operating budget was when it was finalized. It is a major blow to charter schools in the state of Washington, and ironically, at a time where we have a report like this. Chris Korsmo is the executive director of the Washington State Charter Schools Association. He put up a post on March the 11th about this. He said, charter public school students are public school students. They are not asking for a special carve out. They just want to be invested in. It is disheartening that our legislature has reversed its approach for the past 2 school years and made this inequity in our public school system worse. These students are asking for the same support as every other public school student in Washington. They deserve to be believed in. And he was pretty clear that without the funding, they're going to face some impossible choices, cutting teachers that often don't make as much as teachers in traditional public school settings, um, eliminating some of the academic interventions that are there. I think about like the daycare center that's tied to the school in Spokane for teen parents that allows them to continue on and graduate on time, and perhaps based on this report we've been discussing, even have grander success than they ever imagined. I am working on this story for publication later today with links to the report that will be in the article. I did, by the way, reach out to the Washington Education Association for comment because they have been so um, they've been the force, the tide against charter schools from well before they ever were established in the state of Washington. I did not receive a response from the WEA.